Okay, I don't even know what this title is trying to say. A few weeks back, I was browsing Discord looking at various play-by-post D&D roleplay servers just to see what was out there. I found one that looked interesting, so I had my character based on my go-to NPC, Glimmermoon, finding playing a surly bar wench as a bard potentially very amusing. When I told the DM my concept, that she lived somewhere near the tavern she worked at, he was like, no one can afford to own a home or apartment before level 3. Reasonably, I asked him, so how do all the commoners in your town afford them? Are they all level 3 and we're just level 1s? His immediate response was to ban me from the server. Ah yes, the greatest response to criticism. Plug your ears and pretend like nothing ever happened. I've been sitting on this one for a few months and I feel ready to share it. I will fully admit that I'm not a perfect DM and this story will show that, but I think my final response was justified. So I've been running a homebrew game with some college friends since the beginning of the pandemic, starting online and then moving to in-person when we returned to college in the fall. This was my first time DMing. I didn't have a lot of experience with the system, but I really like to tell stories and build worlds. I really wanted to engage and explore the idea of putting together a world for a group of adventurers to explore and create their own story in while I nudged them along with plot hooks. As the summer went on, the group fluctuated as there were scheduling issues, and we went into the fall semester with about one player short of where I wanted to be. I put out some flyers in my college's RPG club and ended up getting a player we'll call Wyatt. I was in a different game with him that was kind of on hiatus due to life and lack of interest, but it hadn't been particularly bad, so I was willing to let him play. A quick introduction to the cast. All names changed. Rubble, who plays a Goliath barbarian looking for a new home for his tribe. Asper, a half-elven cleric from a far-off land. Snaps, an half-elven rogue / Robin Hood type character. Gree, the sidekick kobold the party had gotten a while back and had reasonably mixed feelings over. Acid, our goblin sorcerer, green draconic bloodline, who popped in and out a lot. We had one more player at this point who I thought was returning but didn't, so they're not important to the story. The first red flag, which I totally missed, was that Wyatt asked me to play a druid that was a homebrew race, which was basically a ghost, and he wanted to be a child. Oh. Again, this again, why? Why does this keep on happening? Just stop. No more. Okay? Stop. Anyway. I took a look at the homebrew and quickly determined that it was incredibly swingy and made some suggestions to improve the race because I like to be flexible. Honestly, this should have tipped me off, but the power of the race was all over the place and I was already heavily invested in using homebrew of my own at this point, so I didn't pay it any mind. I was already writing an arc about a group of mutated werewolves and direwolves that were being led by an evil god, so I was able to write this new character into the story without too much trouble, and then I immediately started running into problems. For a start, Wyatt's character just refused to interact with anyone or be any sort of help to the party. Wouldn't talk, ignored what was going on in the story, almost never helped in combat, and basically didn't engage unless the spotlight was focused directly on him. More than once, he wild-shaped and tried to go do his own thing just to steal the spotlight, but he didn't say he was actually doing anything except for antagonizing the party. Heck, when he was first introduced, his response was to run away from everything, including the group, not help in the combat that was going on with the party at all, and just be in the way. I literally had to force Rubble to be his guardian to make them traveling with the party make sense. The character had absolutely no party cohesion, and the player clearly expected to get all the spotlight while never actually doing anything to get that sort of attention. Then there was the part where they refused to share plot-relevant backstory or even recognize that they were dead at all. Ghost, remember? And it's not like I forced them to be plot relevant. He and I discussed how his character would fit into the world extensively before he even joined the group, and he had agreed to his part in the story and how he could get to an important NPC, and then he just didn't. I basically had to railroad the party into the direction they knew they needed to go, but had no idea how to get there, and it was super frustrating. Things began to fall apart with Wyatt about a month after he joined. The party had gone to a city to get treatment for a man who had been bitten by one of the mutated werewolves, to no success, and were getting ready to head back where they came from in search for clues, and talk with locals to get more information. A few things happened at this point. 1. Another player joined the group, who we'll call Pallet, and they were a human warlock sorcerer. Secondly, because I play loose and fast, I decided that Snap's nemesis, an ugly rich dwarf that lived in a distant estate and extorted the nearby peasants, had come into town on business. Pallet used Mask of Many Faces to look like Snap's, which tipped off the noble that the elf was in the town, and the following night had his guards kidnap him while he was camping outside the town with Gree. Gree escaped, barely, and rushed off to tell the rest of the group, and they set off in the dead of night to rescue their friend. However, I had run into a rather large problem. I had absolutely no encounter prepared for the party. I didn't have a lot of time or options, so I chose to introduce another PC, a fellow named Gander, who was a goose Arakoa barbarian/rogue who hails from another plane. I intended for him to be a mentor character and someone who would ask the party for help, and I hadn't introduced him yet, so I figured it would be a good time. One flying barbarian later, and Snaps was helped by Gander to return to the rest of the party. In hindsight, I will fully admit it was not the right call. After the session ended on a whimper, I started getting an earful from Wyatt about how he felt like he shouldn't have come back, and he was useless, and he didn't get to do anything. I admitted I was wrong, that I felt like narratively I had backed myself into a corner and made a poor decision and apologized. The rest of the party agreed, and were not super upset. We moved on. That should have been the end of it, except it wasn't. Wyatt decided to continue berating my DM skills for the next 15 minutes as we got packed up, and then afterwards continued to complain on our Discord about the session. It took several people stepping in and giving a general, "Hey, we get it, now shut up," worded more tactfully out of character, for the conversation to finally end. And to be perfectly frank, it hurt. I was already down and beating myself up about a bad session, and then to be harassed about it and how I did something wrong, it really bothered me. But I ended up just letting it go, because I knew there was some truth in what he was saying, and I tried to have some thick skin. A few weeks later, after the party had finally met up with the ally I had prepped for them, they were heading back to fight the werewolf ringleader, when I get a secret private message from Wyatt accusing me, without context, of secretly making his character a werewolf and telling me not to touch his character or he was leaving the game. Okay, context. In another game that Asper and I were in, we had tied together our backstories as both being part of the same military, and my cleric had saved his fighter's life on the battlefield. I, very stupidly, discussed with the DM to have the way I saved his life be by clockwork organs to replace his damaged ones, which for lore reasons went completely against that character's moral code. I never discussed this with him until, out of character, it was revealed a few weeks later into the game. It was a really stupid thing to do, and once this conversation with Wyatt happened, I immediately went to Asper and apologized for stepping on his character's backstory. We worked it out, it was cool. But Wyatt and Asper were apparently talking out of game about this, and Wyatt immediately assumed that I was going to do the same thing with his character. Once I figured out where this was coming from, I made clear that that's not what's going on. Then I sent him a firmly worded, but not hateful, aggressive, or foul message to clarify some boundaries. In summary, I told him, if you have issues, approach me with some respect and an open mind. Don't come at me, super hostile, and throwing out accusations. I had already dealt with his hateful behavior once, and I will not do it again. 2. I was not going to turn his character into something he didn't want, and I never was going to be controlling or manipulative. That being said, do not tell me how to DM, because I was not going to set that kind of precedent. And 3, do not threaten me with leaving the game if you don't get your way. If you don't want to be at the table for any reason, that's fine, but I don't need you here either. You're choosing to be here of your own volition. I'm choosing to let you be part of the group of my own volition. If you're going to cause a problem, I'm not going to be shy from removing you. That was it. No insults, no language, nothing. Maybe it was a little harsh, but the first isolated incident of complaining was now looking a lot more like large red flags of a player that didn't respect my boundaries as a DM or a person, and I was trying to put my foot down before this went any further. I am a little hot-tempered, but I want to make it clear that I try to keep my words in check and to have a respectful conversation. On the other hand, Wyatt decided to go off on me in a multi-PM rant about how I refused to accept the olive branch he extended. I don't know what that means, and how I was a garbage person. I will be honest, I only barely skimmed it because it was at least 1,000 words and I really didn't want to deal with the negativity. He ended it by saying he was leaving the party and, word for word, I hope your bowl of cereal is full of ants. I'm slowly losing my mind. Anyway, it was almost like he was trying to be as nasty as possible without actually saying anything that could get him in trouble. It would have been laughable if he wasn't being such an absolute prat. I blocked him on Discord. He dropped both my game and the one we had on hiatus, which caused that one to officially end. I have not talked to him since. I've seen him exactly once since then, and it was at a meeting for an RPG club a few weeks before winter break, and he passively gave me the biggest stink eye he could. I ignored him. Haven't seen him on campus since. Now, I'm no saint, and I will admit that there was some blame on me for how I handled things. There were ways I could have dealt with the situation better, but to put my honest opinion bluntly, he decided to be a man-child brat and rage quit because I wasn't going to put up with his behavior. I'm honestly glad he's gone. I'm just glad I didn't have to throw him out myself. The group still plays and we're doing fine. I found a replacement rather quickly for Wyatt and we moved on with the plot and our lives. My DM skills have improved immensely since then and still are improving now. I also have several other horror stories, some ongoing, others not, but I'll save those for another day. Funny, we had an intro about a DM not taking criticism and a story about a player who gives rather bad criticism. Now, what do I mean by bad criticism? Well, it's quite simple. When you're giving your criticism, don't be a dick, and don't do it for a selfish reason. This player was criticizing because he didn't get his way, not because the DM did something wrong. That was part of it, but it was mostly because the player wasn't getting his way in the game. That's not a good way to deliver criticism. It's just the player being a dick. Don't do that. If you're going to criticize, don't make it personal. Just tell the DM what's going on and be civil about it. I respect the DM for putting his foot down. Sometimes it can be hard. It can feel jerkish to reject someone's criticism like that, because usually that's a bad thing, rejecting criticism. But it's not the DM rejecting the criticism, it's the DM rejecting the manner it was given to him, which is good. Establishing boundaries is important. You're still a person. DMs are still people. You can't just yell and scream at them for doing something wrong and expect that they just take that in, because that's wrong. Don't do that. And DMs, if you want to put your foot down and something like that happens, I think that's totally okay. Anyway, if you guys enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then please do hit subscribe. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.